Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Vibes. And I'd like to welcome here Susan Hensley, who is an author, transformational coach, and a speaker. And I noticed something in your bio that talked about art journaling. So I'm curious about that, if you don't mind talking about it. But before we get into all that, tell us a little bit more about you.
Great. Well, one, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. So, a little bit about me, like probably a lot of your listeners, I've had a meandering path to my current role. I had a first career in journalism, lot television news back in the day. It was a little different back then, and always swore I'd never write a book, and was trained not to write personally, right? Keep your opinions out of it, get sources. And then I had another whole career working for a really large corporation. I was an executive there. And about 6 years ago, I stumbled into art journaling. And what I didn't mention was an executive and human resources. And so I had a bunch of tools and certifications and did a bunch of coaching, career coaching, executive coaching, getting teams to work together, all that good stuff. It was great stuff. I stumbled into art journaling, a weekend thing with a friend. I made brown, which is not hard to do if you know anything about combining colors. Just a few paints and not being patient. And I love the brown mess I made. And I was a real student, and I always coach people to pay attention to these glimmers of joy. To anytime you're doing something and you get that spark or this sense of that's really cool, or ooh, and that darn brown soggy piece of paper I created, where everyone else in this little weekend workshop was learning to draw a face in proportions. I don't know how I missed that, but I did, because I sat in my corner and I didn't follow instructions, and I had a great time. And I actually went home and put it on the refrigerator in the house. My husband and son are like, huh? But I was so proud of this mess. And so what happened is, working full time, pandemic hits, crazy period to be working and trapped in. And the more I art journaled, what happened is I realized my inner wisdom, my authentic self, started talking to me through those pages. If I looked back through the art journal, I understood it was time to leave that job. Hard decision to make, because I had made it to the top, and I left the company, quite honestly, and defined myself. I was making really good money, which is super hard to give up in society. And it just didn't fit anymore. And we'll talk more about some of the images that were coming up. But when I left that job, I recognized, and I didn't know what to do. And, people, all the advice is figure out what you want to do next. Don't just jump off a cliff. I sort of jumped off that proverbial cliff and realized I needed to do what I always said I wouldn't do, which was not only write a book, but write a really personal book about my journey, if you will, into art journaling. And that really started this whole new career. Was first the book, which came out, this summer, called Art for Your Sanity: How Art Journaling Can Help You Manage Chaos and Unleash Joy. Then, of course, I started speaking about it, doing workshops, you do an online training. It just it snowballed. And so it's a long answer, but it takes you back to that first thing, which is, how the heck did I end up art journaling?
You bring up something. A lot of people, they dream of, when they get into a company, oh, I can't wait until I'm in charge and I got that cushy job, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's funny, because they think it's all cushy and you don't do anything. But once you get up in management, it's a whole new world. It's not fun anymore. People are going to look at you if things go wrong. Put it that way.
Absolutely.
So That is that like the main thing that you hear from other people is I don't like this anymore. It wasn't what I expected.
So when I do coaching around transitions and transformation, if we think about our lives, if we step back, we're going through a transition as adults. The research shows about every 12 to 18 months. Now, transitions can be physically, you move locations, that's a transition. Something can change in your relationship status, right? You become a parent or a child leaves home, you hook up with a partner, right? Something like that. It can all sorts of things happen in careers. You can choose to leave a job can choose to leave you. You end up, being promoted. So if you think of our lives and how frequently we go through transitions, when I'm doing career coaching, by the time someone comes to me really wants to talk to their career, yeah, something's not fitting anymore. Either they have changed or the position isn't what they wanted. It doesn't feel as value based, or they don't feel that they can be successful in it. And so it can be a little bit of everything, because as companies or careers or consumers change, right? The people who are serving them and working them are also changing. So it's really a pretty delicate dance. One of the things I think that's hardest, I'll also do some coaching with younger people and people just trying to figure out their careers. They're told you must love what you do and it has to be your overall purpose and passion. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone. And I think we need to scale some of that pressure back to um, smaller amounts of joy, purpose. Do you feel aligned versus as a young person just starting out, how the heck do you know what you're going to do? And you're going to change. Things are going to stop fitting you at some point.
When I'd go out and check on the guys in the field, I would pull up and I'd be like, "Hey, let me get on the backhoe again." And that was where I found my peace.
Mm.
That was my zen, being on the equipment and digging and what have you. I mean, yeah, it's great being in charge, but there was just something about, being out there doing the work and being on the equipment again. And I don't know, maybe I'm way off base here, but I feel like you kind of have to be almost a ruthless person or a whole different person to be comfortable moving up that ladder.
So one thing, what I heard you say, and if you and I were talking, is that you love being outside and you love the doing, the hands-on, that satisfaction, that sense of I can turn around and see what I've done. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because so if we were talking, I'd say that is really important with you. There are people, and here's where I think it's comfortable. When we do something that doesn't fit us, I think the bad version of us comes out. I've met some really great leaders who aren't ruthless. Now, without getting into it, I think there's some things in quarterly numbers and public companies that can drive some bad decisions, right? There's some real economic pressures that can drive some really, really bad decisions. But I've met in person more leaders who really want to develop and sort of care for their people. So I think the problem, and you nailed it when you said it, is we're taught we should want that. And then a lot of people end up in leadership positions who don't like it at all and aren't suited for it. And it takes so much courage and self-awareness to say, no, where do I feel I add my most value? Where do I have the most satisfaction? And it's exactly what you described. And the only people who should lead others are people, ironically, who love to help and develop others, who love to cut through like messes and give their teams clarity and like to figure out how to work together. We're just not taught that, though. That's certainly not what you see like on, when you watch shows on TV or streaming. So
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about your book. So if you don't mind, would you get into that?
sure. So Art for Your Sanity, the whole concept, very short book, is really if you're looking for a creative outlet. I think one thing that does happen to all of us as we grow up is we stop playing and doing things just for the sake of doing it. So for me, when I told you about making that brown mess, what it made me really curious about is what did it feel like? And it felt like I was just playing. I didn't need to produce anything. I had really no intention. I thought I'd throw it away. And like I said, I took it home. So if people are intrigued by this, I lots of times have them start with crayons because no one takes himself too seriously when they're holding a crayon. And you do, right? There's like no expectation. If I gave you a box of crayons that you're going to produce anything, you're just going to have some fun. And so many of the people that I work with, their days are packed. They have huge amounts of shoulds that they're working through. They'll say, I try to meditate, but I can't even quiet my mind. It's like, okay, here's some crayons, draw for 10 minutes, make a mess, scribble. So then your hand has something to do, your eyes have something to look at. But because it's a crayon, I haven't yet met any adult who's thinking that they're needing to create a masterpiece, and I'll tell them to scribble. And that's sort of the premise, is we need to introduce some play and some mess into our days. Just 10 minutes a day is what I say. And then if you build that, right, you don't need to be doing this for an hour, 10 minutes. When I first started playing with it, I would do it as I was making breakfast sometimes. I'd be cooking oatmeal and versus like scrolling on my phone or, scrambling some eggs in between, I would color for a few minutes. And I started to realize that. So it starts with play and finding something where it's all about the process and not about the outcome. Then after a while, you start to see it becomes a safe place to process emotions, to sort of start to dream. And that's where you get the messages, that inner wisdom. I told you about the years I was doing this when I realized I needed to leave that role. I was doing a lot of collage. I had the big old glue stick that kids use, big Elmer's glue stick, and never used any expensive art supplies. And that's what keeps it fun. But I started doing collaging and I had all these pictures of people on cliffs, like waiting to jump off, wanting to jump off. And I thought, what interesting imagery, right? What's that? What am I trying to tell myself? I need to take a leap. Then, windy roads and paths. And we're such visual beings who make so much meaning that it can be really interesting what emerges. And both in the book, Art for Your Sanity, and on my online course, we really work through using this as a safe space to process difficult emotions, to help you through a transition. But it doesn't need to be more than 10 minutes a day. And you certainly should never, or never is not fair. I strongly recommend people use kids' art supplies, because the minute you have a fancy art supply that you think you shouldn't waste or you need to do something good with, that inner critic's in your head. You want to use inexpensive stuff that if you break a crayon or it's a watercolor or it's a glue stick or it's glue paste, you don't care because, right, it's not a big investment, and it really keeps that inner critic, which holds us back from listening to what our heart wants.
You have a clinic that you teach people go through the process. So, how does people get a hold of you, and then where you go from there? Do you have a screening you do with people? How's that go?
It sort of depends what a person wants. So easiest place to get a hold of me is website, which is just susan-hensley.com. You can get the book on the website, right? It's not expensive. You can get it anywhere you buy books, quite honestly. I have a free downloadable PDF about how to get started art journaling, right? You just go to the website, you can download it, and it gets you started. The online course is there, and then there's a contact me button, which is really what I use for setting up workshops or speaking engagements or one-on-one coaching. But I think if a person's just curious, it's fun to play because not everything fits everyone. It's right? It's what makes life so great is we're all different. Sometimes it makes life hard because we're all different, but it's actually what makes it great. So if this sparks a little bit of curiosity in one of your listeners, I'd say go there, download the PDF, give it a try, right?
Mhm.
I wrote the book and do all this because I found it really meaningful, and I think it can be a meaningful tool for others that I wanted to share.
And you're a speaker. So do you do any TED Talks or anything like that?
Right now, I'm talking about doing one for next year. So to come, to more to come.
Right.
But no, I have given other talks for other organizations, but on the TED thing, that's got its own process. So we'll see where that ends up.
Have you done Toastmasters yet?
No, because I really haven't done much Toastmasters. I think because of the first career in TV and radio and journalism. When I was in my company, I was always asked to speak. And so I spoke at a lot of industry things for that industry. And that's where I got a lot of that speaking exposure. And now that I'm doing the workshops, it's been through places I've already had some connections. I think whenever we work with someone who's aligned with what they're doing, right, and wants to share, it does rub off. I think it makes people curious and just open to thinking about it and how it might apply to their life, or if it doesn't apply directly, what might apply. Is it 10 minutes of music a day, just singing badly, right? Is it pounding away on a drum? It's just, I think we shut ourselves off too frequently from creative outlets.
Right. Todd Rundgren said, I don't want to work. I want to bang on the drum all day.
Exactly. And I love that. And it's true. Think of how freeing and joyful that is, right?
Right.
That's his version of the crayons that I was talking about and the scribbling. It's just that release of something that makes us joyful.
So one last question. Now there's folks like me where I had to retire early. I'm not physically able to do the job anymore. Do you help people like that transition from, I was used to working 60 hours a week, what have you, to now I'm doing this, which this is my outlet, but some people may not have the outlet like this.
So absolutely. If you think of the transition you just shared, that's one of the really big ones. That's a physical transition. And yeah, transitions have endings. And I was talking about the pace at which we go through transitions. The endings aren't ones we choose many times. And there's a whole grief process that I work with people through and letting go. And then what is your new identity? And it's not clear when we sort of lose one identity, particularly if it gave us a lot of purpose and joy. And you talk about how much you liked doing it and being out. How do you create a new one? And it's not straight. It's that messy middle, right? With lots of one step back, two sideways, three forward. And we have tools, or I have tools that help people sort of work through that. And what are some of the beliefs that might be limiting a person in starting? And even when you find that new thing, there are inevitable challenges with it, right? You've created something really, really cool. And I've listened to a bunch of your broadcasts, but I bet you have asked things about it that present some challenges or questions about how you keep moving it forward. So that's exactly what I work with people on. And that was a really great example of a it ended up being a professional transition caused by a physical transition as well, right? So you had two. You had a few more of those, like you moved during that, and you have what in the business we call like almost a life quake. You have a lot happening at the same time that really needs some time to process and can feel very disorienting.
In the end, I think people just want to feel like they have a purpose in life. There was guys that I worked with that when they retired, within the 2 years after retirement, they passed away. They didn't feel like they mattered anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we all need purpose, and rather part of the work I do and other people who work in this space is helping people find that purpose. And they describe it, it doesn't have to be a big capital P purpose. It can be a series of small things, but you have to really excavate and do, because the story you told about those guys that you used to work with is, I think everyone's fear in the back of their minds as they think of retiring or not being able to work, because we've all heard that story. And depending on your age and situation, it's scary. And, or you think, I'm just gonna lay there and, be on my phone or watch TV and lose connection. It's a really, that transition from like working where you felt like you had a reason every day to not, and the period it takes to find something, whatever it may be, that makes you feel some purpose is, it's a tough one. And I think people can use a lot of support during it, because societally we haven't done a great job of telling people how to do it and giving them resources, right? There's images of, go fish or be with grandkids, but that's not for everyone. Then there's the scary stories you talked about. And yet there's so much more we can do. Just looks really different.
Exactly. One more time, give us your website.
Sure. It's Susan-Hensley. That's Hensley.com.
All right. And what is your social media?
So not great on social media, but I'm on LinkedIn, and the best way is probably on Instagram, which is Susan Hensley Art Journaling.
Right. I will put those links in the description just to make it easier for folks to find you. Susan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you. Enjoyed the conversation thoroughly. So appreciate you having me.
And also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button. For my regulars, you guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. Till the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network